had been nullified. It was as if his 3 legs had folded beneath him as he shuffled away from a continual danger. Such questioning of his abilities meant that his fame was nothing, and suddenly he didn't know if he was a dead artist or a terminated climactic charmer. His unpleasant astonishment was augmented by a complete lack of knowledge of the mysterious method by which this Dr. Harry Johnson had gained access to Mr. Brakeman's deepest secret. Such direct men depend heavily on the inelegant revelations that mistresses make. However, Puss Titter was not suspecting the conveyance of this information. On the contrary, she must be kept insensible to the shameful discovery. Mr. Brakeman's mood lightened somewhat, and he clicked the reply button. Dear Mr. Johnson, I have considered your entreaties with difficulty, and I must admit to doubtful advances towards your blessing. Initially, my package rejoiced at the prospect of insisted pleasure, but then my room filled with doubt music and precautions regarding the acceptance of your astonished excellence. However, your encouragement of Viagra's greater use and the agreeable conveyances of your assurances have diverted my hesitations. To be sure, my sex moments are now narrow enough, and my future has been read so many times, I am certain the only remedies will come from elsewhere. I have met many ladies that agreed to the joy and vanity in which you and I earnestly believe. But amorousness requires a stamina my elderly frame finds wanting. I am paid up. Nature has played dirty with me. I expected that my absolutely positive reply to your inquiry would be met with a fictitious response. Any questions? Now this is a lot of this just came through my emails and so forth, and in order to get the narrative sort of working here, I had to put in some of my own words. So it's not 100% spam, but you get the idea. Do you want to keep going?
Yeah.
All right.
No white sides.
The constant style of the lurking afternoon malfunctioned badly as the insipid light flushed in through the windows, groaning across Mr. Brakeman's disaster like a calculated curse. Every sound was like some faraway person's gibberish expanding in a paperback of bad poetry. Mr. Brakeman sought the teapot on the table the way the prophet of an incidental religion studies a road map looking for a potential lead, his bloated tongue populating the horrid research. His nerves were wrecked from the abuse, and his waffle tasted like an iced nightmare as the unfaithful coffee slid down his throat with a disappointing inertia. Even the household itself seemed stricken with shame for his odious change into a feeble bastard of limited consequence. He went outside to escape the transformation. Out on the street it was no better. Every calculated particle of the day's pesterings seemed to hinder his advance. A map bicycled past him, steaming like a project without initiative, as a bum that reeked of tobacco cried across the expressway. These touching schemes, as trifling as they were, served to lift his forlorn spirits, and he decided to stop off at the Bit and Thread for a cup of coffee. But more importantly, he could check his email, a morning protocol he had completely forgotten to fulfill in his condition of smashed overload. He sat at the invading computer with his motionless breakfast and felt a charmed future forming as he warmed up. And yet, not all his thoughts were exercising along his blessings. He anticipated a reply to his late-night communique to Dr. Harry Johnson regarding the free Viagra. With such anticipation, it was no surprise that the response was at the top of his inbox, each verb overwhelming the sentence that carried it. Beloved Mr. Brakeman, I hope this correspondence is received with the urgency and expedience required by its delivery. Let us refer to the arrival of your complimentary sample of the potion for drilling her all day. Our amphetamine correspondent, an expert at connecting email and postal addresses, has already delivered the Viagra au gratis to your apartment. As a result, your next cacophonous sexual assault will be a long-drawn psychic process. Don't demolish her. You may want to fuck her again and repeatedly. I didn't make that up. It's so true. Now you can ignore the fatigue, stress, and everything else that was in the way of your bedroom athleticism. The nefarious deficit that plied your pile driver will become a surplus of wild and horny dissent. I'm aware that imposters are scamming people in my name. Please, do not try to contact me through any of my email address, because they are connected to the British House of Parliament database. What he said, Dr. Harry Johnson. P.S. This postscript withdraws beneath its recent example. Mara?
Yeah.
All right, sound good? Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm getting aroused.
It's not surprising. Okay.
Tell us about her.
Are you okay with some Puss Titter? All right. All right, so Puss Titter at this point has received a check for a certain amount of money, but it's in a currency she doesn't know. So she's going to go meet this guy who's going to let her know if the check's worth anything. All right? Puss Titter followed Baron Ladyship down the furrowed streets of Hilltown Eye to the Impervious Hotel, passing burrows made of shiplap lumber that exhaled a poverty-stricken and neglected air. The hotel was located far from any markets, and the surrounding settlements were poor and cracked from the sun, orbiting their curse like a lazy debutante. The Impervious Hotel was a somewhat pretentious double-story building of unpainted wood with a veranda in front of it, the sort of place where women wash clothes and men starve. The lobby harbored impresarios living with elusive toothpicks, pathetic dilettantes, half-hearted brides, all clustered around a smelly grand piano. Baron Ladyship strode by the unfashionable particle accelerator in the middle of the room and made his way towards the shadow ferry behind the reception desk. Puss Titter watched as a key was passed across the counter like a tool that shelters a divine satellite. She followed Baron Ladyship up the grand staircase, impressing herself with the belief that some sort of end was drawing near. As they passed through the spoiled walls of a corridor, Puss Titter felt as though she was about to receive a visitor, even though it was her that would soon act as the guest. Baron Ladyship knocked on the door like a rapturous fighter pilot railing against an unexplained distrust. Puss Titter's innocence began to withdraw as the door opened and the newly witnessed interior steamed across her lenses. The purple cramp of the room made it appear like a cargo bay of cowards, self-righteous lunatics, absolute suspects. Yet Puss Titter's analysis did not reward her with an alert. Whatever sacked enterprise and disconnected subroutines were cooperating within those four walls had reformed any of her reactionary implications, and she stepped right in. Puss Titter's ambitious atheism had piled her anatomy underneath an operational cynicism. As she took stock of her new companions, she relaxed, trusting that her faith in Baron Ladyship assured her of a superficial rescue. In the corner of the quarters sat a man who seemed built for physical discomfort, evidencing the kind of annoyances one would attribute to a long and wearisome stage ride. His roused fat appeared to have been subjected to numerous inconveniences and hardships, although he had used up all the extended assistance and kindness he had been offered since his birth. His tiled face seemed in need of a wife, but no unpleasant entreaties projected past its general neutrality. The man had been preserved by the climate of the lodgings. His identity depended as much on Is that good? Is that good?
That's the other page.
Trying to get some Viagra online here.
Yeah.
Paul.
He's tracking.
Okay. All right. This is the last part. It's a sex scene. Okay. Best blowjob in town over there. Everybody's looking for it. As twilight compressed the data of the day's events, the evening's aberrant genesis extended into every vicinity. The night's headline had been, "More dead for more country," and it was written on the grenade bonnet of the crumbled taxi that carried Mr. Breakwind and Puss Titter through the consonant door opening of their garage and deep into the interior grotto. Mr. Breakwind winced as he embarked, the criminal position of his stone pine forcing him to advance as if laying male eggs. I forgot to mention he's now on the Viagra. So, all right. And Puss Titter, okay, so. The audacious intentions that he had savored during his pilgrimage from the bar now thwarted his progress, and he crept forward like a transported ruin. Puss Titter made drunken and muddled attempts to assist her husband while mounting the gradel's gateway as his steaming blast condensed around him. They put all their joy miles in solid order, passing the aggregating paintings of important cities. The inconvenient but stimulating confines of the boudoir sabotaged any attempts at decency. The room powered sex. It was time for Mr. Breakman to unsheath his starring rod and reveal the power coordinates of its angle. Puss Titter blushed up to him, hastened in her pursuit of his manhood by her wonderment at his handsome command of the stiff extension. For the second time that day, Mr. Breakwind's zipper was undone by foreign teeth, and Puss Titter made a low revving sound as she attended to his weapon with her exclusive craft. She watched herself in the mirror, hungering anew as she admired her own pornographic appetite. Mr. Breakwind burst with a similar vanity as he blazed under the effects of the stimulant he had ingested. They looked like scandalized royalty, exiled there in each other's sinful empire. Puss Titter rose as if gravity was an insufficient proposal, her legs coining a salacious glance from Mr. Breakwind. She made a wild gesture, and suddenly the air above them was filled with $100 bills, floating like bits of a chaotic puzzle released from some imposed order. The dreamy room was transformed into an emerald snow globe, cash littering the floor and floating in the ether above the ball-bearing and priapic couple. Mr. Breakman hesitated under the poetic shower and then ripped open Puss Titter's dress, sucking at her creamy teats like a luxurious food. They leaned into each other, dropping clothes like immodest and unapologetic servants involved in a bedroom sabotage. Their resolute sex machine pumped underneath the cascade of cash, Puss Titter's socket receiving Mr. Breakwind's ambrosial charge like an effervescent initiate. She bent over as their fulsome concatenation continued, twisting her bandwagon tail to match his sexual mastery and indefatigable.
Scooted over.
Bad fuck. They separated, and Puss Titter drifted across the room like a beautiful continent. Her amygdaloidal sweetness was juvenile and immediate, exactly what Mr. Breakman's hook logic called for. They fell onto the bed, the love cradle's indiscreet mythology buried by an ace chunk of century bills. As he lathered on top of Puss Titter, Mr. Breakwind's opus extended into physics, his romantic virtues dotting past any possible heresies. Their decisive exertions reached a rapturous resolve, culminating with the understanding that each other's needs formed a wonderful symmetry. Puss Titter screamed out with a fantastic insistence, and Mr. Breakwind silently came as they orbited each other in a solar wonder. The colors deadened in the room as their ardor cooled. They lay together like two murderers at crossing roads, bound together by sin but forced to wander at odds. Mr. Brakeman leaned over the stroke of Puss Titter's dismissive neck and breathed in the ascending cloud of her funk. She was the only girl who knew the true story of his fall and rise, a real arm-through-the-arm type, a heavy love-notion flower dancer. Mr. Brakeman imagined that up in heavens, her guardian angel was digging deep in a basket of souls, like an old woman looking for a favorite ball of yarn. Mr. Brakeman's presence took a purely material shape as he picked up 100 and left the room, walking alone into the regional sanctuary of their infectious burrow like a human being tailpipe. Anybody have any questions?